The rumble grew louder, vibrating through the ground like a distant storm. Ryan's heart pounded as he glanced at the alien woman. She was still too weak to move on her own. Whoever, or whatever, was coming, they couldn't stay here. "Can you walk?" Ryan asked urgently, though he wasn't sure she understood. The alien woman shook her head slightly, her glowing skin flickering like a dimming light bulb. Ryan gritted his teeth, realizing he had no choice. Slinging his backpack over one shoulder, he knelt down beside her. "I'll carry you," he said. Her violet eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't resist as he gently lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost as if gravity had less of a hold on her. Ryan started up the steep side of the crater, his boots sinking into the loose sand. The heat pressed down on him, and his muscles burned, but he pushed forward. Whatever was chasing her couldn't find them. As they reached the top, the sound of engines roared closer. Ryan ducked instinctively, crouching behind a dune. He carefully shifted the alien woman in his arms to peek over the ridge. In the distance, 3 sleek, black crafts hovered above the ground, their sharp edges gleaming under the sun. They were unlike anything Ryan had ever seen, clearly not of Earth. Each craft emitted a low, menacing hum, and Ryan could see figures stepping out. They were tall, armored beings, their movements precise and methodical. Their helmets concealed their faces, but their weapons, which glowed with the same eerie blue light as the alien woman's wound, were unmistakable. The alien woman stirred weakly in his arms. "Hunters," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They won't stop." Ryan swallowed hard. Whoever these hunters were, they were clearly looking for her, and judging by their advanced technology, they wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who got in their way. "We need to move," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Staying low, Ryan crept down the opposite side of the dune, keeping as much distance as possible from the hunters. His truck was parked a few miles away, hidden behind a cluster of rocks. If they could make it there, they might have a chance. Every step was agonizingly slow. The alien woman clung to him, her breathing shallow but steady. She seemed to sense his fear, but said nothing, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a sharp explosion behind them. Sand erupted in a fiery blast, showering them with debris. Ryan shielded the alien woman as they tumbled to the ground. "They'd spotted us," Ryan hissed, his mind racing. The alien woman raised a trembling hand, her fingertips glowing faintly. A shimmering barrier of light formed around them just as another blast struck, deflecting the energy. Ryan stared in awe, but quickly snapped back to reality. "We're not giving up," he said fiercely, tightening his grip on her. "Hold on." And with that, he broke into a desperate run toward the truck, the hunters closing in behind them. Ryan sprinted through the uneven desert terrain, his legs burning with each step. The alien woman clung to him weakly, her glowing hand still faintly radiating light from the protective barrier she had conjured. Behind them, the hunters were relentless, their crafts hovering closer, engines screeching like banshees in the wind. His truck was finally in sight, a battered but reliable old vehicle parked behind a cluster of jagged rocks. Relief surged through Ryan, but it was short-lived. A sharp, searing beam of light blasted the sand just a few feet to his left, sending him stumbling forward. "They're not stopping," Ryan gasped, clutching the alien woman tighter as he regained his footing. "Run," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Leave me. Save yourself." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Not a chance," he muttered, pushing himself harder. He wasn't about to abandon her, not after coming this far. As they reached the truck, Ryan yanked the door open with one hand and carefully placed the alien woman on the passenger seat. Her silver skin was dimming, and her violet eyes fluttered closed. He slammed the door shut and raced to the driver's side, fumbling with the keys in his pocket. A loud metallic clang echoed through the air as one of the hunter crafts landed just yards away. The armored figures stepped out, their glowing weapons raised. Ryan could feel their piercing gaze, even through their helmets. "Don't look back," he whispered to himself as he shoved the key into the ignition. The truck roared to life, the engine sputtering before steadying. He floored the accelerator, the tires spinning in the sand before finding traction and launching them forward. A barrage of blue energy blasts followed, each narrowly missing the truck as it barreled over the uneven desert. Ryan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. The truck wasn't built for speed, but it was sturdy, and right now, that was all he could rely on. The alien woman stirred beside him, her voice faint. "Take left," she whispered. Ryan glanced at her, confused, but followed her direction. He veered sharply to the left, the truck bouncing wildly over a rocky incline. As they crested the hill, a shimmering distortion appeared ahead, a hidden cavern entrance that seemed to ripple like water. "What is that?" Ryan muttered, but there was no time for answers. The hunters were closing in. "Drive through," the alien woman said, her eyes fluttering open briefly. Ryan hesitated for only a moment before slamming the accelerator. The truck hurtled forward, and as they passed through the distortion, everything went silent. The light dimmed, and the desert vanished, replaced by a dark, cool tunnel. Ryan slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt. He sat there, breathing hard, his heart racing. Behind them, the entrance shimmered for a moment before vanishing entirely. He looked over at the alien woman. She was still, her glow faint but steady. "What just happened?" he asked softly. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Safe, for now." Then she drifted into unconsciousness. The small cabin sat hidden deep within the woods, a temporary refuge Ryan had hoped would give them time to think. He pushed open the creaky wooden door and stepped inside, the alien woman still weak in his arms. Her glowing skin flickered faintly, like a candle about to burn out. Ryan gently placed her on the worn couch and pulled a blanket over her. She gave a slight nod, acknowledging his care, but her violet eyes were clouded with exhaustion and pain. "Stay here," he said softly. "I'll make sure it's safe." The alien woman didn't respond, her energy too drained. Ryan checked the windows, making sure they were locked, and adjusted the curtains to block any light from escaping. Outside, the night was still, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Returning to her side, Ryan knelt down. "What's your name?" he asked, realizing he had been calling her the alien in his mind. She hesitated, as if unsure how to answer. Finally, she whispered, "Aylin." Ryan smiled. "Aylin. I'm Ryan. I guess that makes us officially introduced." Aylin tilted her head slightly, her gaze softening. "Why? Help?" she asked, the words slow but clear. She seemed to struggle with the concept, as if no one in her life had ever shown her kindness before. Ryan leaned back, running a hand through his messy hair. "Because you needed it," he said simply. "You were hurt, and I couldn't just leave you." Aylin's glowing eyes studied him intently, searching for any hidden motive. When she found none, her expression softened further, though confusion lingered. "You're kind. Strange." Ryan chuckled lightly. "You're not wrong about that." Their brief moment of calm was interrupted by a distant sound, a low hum, barely audible but unmistakable. Ryan's stomach tightened. The hunters were getting closer. They didn't have much time. "I need to know more about these hunters," Ryan said, his tone serious. "What do they want from you?" Aylin sat up slightly, wincing as she moved. "I escaped," she began, her voice strained. "My people, not free. Controlled. I refused." She paused, struggling to find the right words. "They hunt those who disobey." Ryan frowned, anger flickering in his chest. "So they're after you because you wanted to make your own choices." Aylin nodded, her shoulders slumping. "Freedom, dangerous. Well, not here, Ryan said firmly. On Earth, we fight for it. His words seemed to resonate with Aelin. For the first time, a flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. Fight. Together. Ryan smiled. Yeah, together. The hum grew louder, snapping them both to attention. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and a wrench from his bag. Crude weapons, but better than nothing. Aelin reached for her device, its light weak but still functional. We'll protect each other, Ryan said, determination in his voice. And with that, they prepared to face whatever came next, bound by a fragile but growing trust. The hum outside grew louder, turning into a pulsing vibration that shook the cabin's walls. Ryan's heart raced as he peered out through a crack in the curtain. In the dim moonlight, he could see the shadowy forms of the hunters' crafts hovering just beyond the trees. The hunters had found them. They're here, Ryan whispered, glancing back at Aelin. She was still weak, but her violet eyes burned with determination. They will not stop, Aelin said, her voice low but steady. But we can outsmart them. Ryan nodded. What do we have to work with? Aelin lifted her broken device, the faint glow from its center pulsing irregularly. This can disrupt their signals, but it needs power. Ryan scanned the room, his mind racing. His eyes landed on the old generator in the corner, a relic from the cabin's previous owner. That might work, he said, pointing to it. But it's noisy. They'll hear us. We have no choice, Aelin replied. Their weapons, too strong. We need an advantage. Ryan grabbed the device from her, inspecting it closely. Its design was unlike anything he had ever seen, smooth, seamless, and glowing faintly with a blue energy that seemed alive. What do I do? He asked. Aelin guided him with quick, precise instructions, her voice growing more confident as they worked together. Ryan connected wires from the generator to the alien device, sparks flying as he made the final connection. The device hummed to life, its glow intensifying. Good, Aelin said, though her face was pale from exhaustion. Now, we wait. The hunters didn't make them wait long. A sharp beam of light pierced through the trees, illuminating the cabin. Ryan ducked instinctively, pulling Aelin down with him. The sound of footsteps, heavy and metallic, approached the front door. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as the first hunter appeared in the window. Its helmeted head turned slowly, scanning the room. The alien armor gleamed under the light, and its weapon glowed ominously. Aelin pressed a button on the device, and a sharp, high-pitched whine filled the air. The hunter staggered, its movements jerky as if its systems were malfunctioning. Ryan saw his chance. Grabbing the wrench, he swung it with all his strength, striking the hunter's weapon. The alien weapon sparked and fell to the ground, disabled. Another one is coming, Aelin warned, pointing to the back door. Ryan scrambled to block the door, pushing an old bookshelf in front of it. He turned to Aelin. Can you keep the signal going? Aelin nodded, her hand steady on the device, despite her weakness. I won't let them win. The cabin shook as another hunter tried to break through. Ryan grabbed the alien weapon he had disarmed and aimed it at the door. To his surprise, the weapon hummed in his hands, responding to his touch. He fired. A beam of blue energy shot out, striking the second hunter. It collapsed with a metallic thud. Ryan and Aelin exchanged a look, their unlikely partnership growing stronger. We can do this, Ryan said. Together, they prepared for the next wave, united by a shared determination to survive. The cabin was eerily silent after the clash. The faint hum of the alien device was the only sound, accompanied by the occasional flicker of sparks from the disabled hunters lying outside. Ryan leaned against the wall, his breath ragged. He wiped sweat from his forehead, his grip still tight on the alien weapon. Aelin sat slumped on the couch, her hands trembling as she held the glowing device. Her silver skin was dim, her energy clearly waning. Yet her violet eyes still burned with determination. They'll send more, she said, her voice soft but resolute. Ryan nodded. Then we need to get out of here before they do. The alien device, now fully charged, pulsed steadily in her hands. She looked at it thoughtfully before meeting Ryan's gaze. This can create a barrier, but only for a short time. A barrier? Like a shield? Ryan asked, intrigued. Aelin nodded. It will block their weapons and their tracking systems, but it will drain everything. Her voice wavered as she said the last word, and Ryan realized she wasn't just talking about the device. It would drain her too. No, he said firmly. You're already too weak. We'll find another way. There is no other way, she replied, her tone insistent. If they find us again, you will not survive. Ryan's jaw tightened. He hated how helpless he felt. He was used to solving problems with logic and reason, but this situation was beyond anything he had ever faced. What if we use it to buy time? He suggested. We can activate it and get to your ship wherever it is. Aelin hesitated, then nodded. The ship is hidden, not far. If we reach it, I can leave, and they will follow. Ryan felt a pang of guilt at the thought of her leaving, but he pushed it aside. The priority was keeping both of them alive. All right, let's move. He quickly packed the essentials: water, the alien weapon, and a flashlight, before helping Aelin to her feet. She was light as ever, but he could feel her leaning on him more heavily now. As they stepped outside, the cool night air was a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded moments ago. The device in Aelin's hands emitted a soft glow, casting an otherworldly light around them. She activated it with a trembling hand, and a shimmering dome of energy expanded outward, enveloping them. The moment it formed, Ryan felt a strange sensation, like static electricity brushing against his skin. Go, Aelin urged, her voice strained. They moved as quickly as they could, Aelin guiding him through the dense forest. The barrier shielded them from detection, but Ryan could feel the weight of the tension as Aelin grew weaker with each step. Finally, they reached a small clearing. There, half buried under dirt and leaves, was her ship, a sleek silver craft that seemed to hum faintly, as if alive. We made it, Ryan said, relief flooding him. But his relief was short-lived. The barrier flickered, and in the distance, the sound of hunters grew louder again. Time was running out. Ryan stared at Aelin's ship, its metallic surface gleaming faintly under the moonlight. Relief surged through him, but it was quickly drowned out by the distant hum of the hunters' crafts. They were closing in fast. Aelin swayed on her feet, her shimmering skin dimming even further. The device in her hands flickered weakly, the barrier struggling to hold. I can start the ship, she said, her voice barely audible. But it will take time. Ryan nodded, gripping the alien weapon tighter. I'll hold them off. Aelin's violet eyes widened slightly. No, you cannot. Face them alone. I don't have a choice, Ryan replied firmly. If they get to you, it's over. You get that ship running, and I'll buy you all the time I can. For a moment, she looked like she might protest, but then she nodded, a flicker of respect in her gaze. Be careful. Ryan didn't answer. He turned and sprinted back toward the trees, positioning himself between the clearing and the approaching hunters. His heart pounded, but his resolve was unshakable. The first hunter appeared through the dense foliage, its glowing eyes scanning the area. Ryan raised the alien weapon, its smooth surface warming under his grip. He aimed and fired. A beam of blue energy shot out, striking the hunter square in the chest. It collapsed in a heap, sparks flying from its armor. More followed. The hunters moved with precision, their weapons glowing ominously. Ryan ducked behind a tree as energy blasts scorched the ground around him. His mind raced, his instincts kicking in. He couldn't overpower them, but he could outsmart them. He grabbed a rock and threw it into the bushes, creating a diversion. Two hunters turned toward the sound, and Ryan used the moment to fire again, disabling one. The other spotted him and fired back, forcing him to dive behind cover. From the corner of his eye, Ryan saw Aylin's ship coming to life. Its engines hummed, and faint lights began to glow along its sleek surface. She was making progress, but time was running out. A sudden explosion rocked the clearing as a hunter launched a grenade-like device. The shockwave knocked Ryan off his feet, and his weapon flew from his hand. He scrambled to his knees, blood pounding in his ears. A hunter loomed over him, its weapon aimed directly at his chest. Before it could fire, a sharp beam of light struck the hunter, sending it crashing to the ground. Ryan turned to see Aylin standing unsteadily at the ship's entrance, holding a smaller version of her device. Her violet eyes blazed with determination. "Get inside," she yelled, her voice stronger than before. Ryan didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the ship as Aylin covered him, her shots precise despite her exhaustion. The moment he stepped inside, the ship's door sealed shut. Aylin collapsed into the pilot's seat, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. The ship roared to life, lifting off the ground just as the hunters swarmed the clearing below. Ryan watched through the window as the ground grew distant, the hunters left behind. Relief washed over him, but he knew this wasn't over yet. Aylin's trembling hands and pale face told him the true fight was still to come. Ryan stared at Aylin's ship, its metallic surface gleaming faintly under the moonlight. Relief surged through him, but it was quickly drowned out by the distant hum of the hunters' crafts. They were closing in fast. Aylin swayed on her feet, her shimmering skin dimming even further. The device in her hands flickered weakly, the barrier struggling to hold. "I can start the ship," she said, her voice barely audible. "But it will take time." Ryan nodded, gripping the alien weapon tighter. "I'll hold them off." Aylin's violet eyes widened slightly. "No, you cannot. Face them alone." "I don't have a choice," Ryan replied firmly. "If they get to you, it's over. You get that ship running, and I'll buy you all the time I can." For a moment, she looked like she might protest, but then she nodded, a flicker of respect in her gaze. "Be careful." Ryan didn't answer. He turned and sprinted back toward the trees, positioning himself between the clearing and the approaching hunters. His heart pounded, but his resolve was unshakable. The first hunter appeared through the dense foliage, its glowing eyes scanning the area. Ryan raised the alien weapon, its smooth surface warming under his grip. He aimed and fired. A beam of blue energy shot out, striking the hunter square in the chest. It collapsed in a heap, sparks flying from its armor. More followed. The hunters moved with precision, their weapons glowing ominously. Ryan ducked behind a tree as energy blasts scorched the ground around him. His mind raced, his instincts kicking in. He couldn't overpower them, but he could outsmart them. He grabbed a rock and threw it into the bushes, creating a diversion. Two hunters turned toward the sound, and Ryan used the moment to fire again, disabling one. The other spotted him and fired back, forcing him to dive behind cover. From the corner of his eye, Ryan saw Aylin's ship coming to life. Its engines hummed, and faint lights began to glow along its sleek surface. She was making progress, but time was running out. A sudden explosion rocked the clearing as a hunter launched a grenade-like device. The shockwave knocked Ryan off his feet, and his weapon flew from his hand. He scrambled to his knees, blood pounding in his ears. A hunter loomed over him, its weapon aimed directly at his chest. Before it could fire, a sharp beam of light struck the hunter, sending it crashing to the ground. Ryan turned to see Aylin standing unsteadily at the ship's entrance, holding a smaller version of her device. Her violet eyes blazed with determination. "Get inside," she yelled, her voice stronger than before. Ryan didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the ship as Aylin covered him, her shots precise despite her exhaustion. The moment he stepped inside, the ship's door sealed shut. Aylin collapsed into the pilot's seat, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. The ship roared to life, lifting off the ground just as the hunters swarmed the clearing below. Ryan watched through the window as the ground grew distant, the hunters left behind. Relief washed over him, but he knew this wasn't over yet. Aylin's trembling hands and pale face told him the true fight was still to come. The ship soared through the night sky, leaving the chaos of the hunters behind. Ryan leaned against the sleek interior wall, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. The hum of the alien craft was both soothing and surreal, a stark contrast to the violence they had just escaped. Aylin sat slumped in the pilot's chair, her hands trembling as they hovered over the glowing controls. Her silver skin had dimmed to a faint glow, and her breaths came in shallow gasps. Ryan rushed to her side. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Let me help." Aylin shook her head weakly. "The ship needs guidance. The autopilot is damaged. I must keep control." Ryan frowned, his mind racing. He wasn't about to let her collapse. "Tell me what to do. I'll take over." Her violet eyes met his, doubt flickering in their depths, but she nodded. She pointed to a console, its symbols glowing faintly. "This keeps us hidden. Press here to adjust course." Ryan quickly moved to the console, following her instructions as best as he could. The alien technology was baffling, but with her guidance, he managed to stabilize the ship. He glanced at her again, worry etched on his face. "You need to rest." "I can't," Aylin whispered, but her voice lacked its usual strength. "They'll keep hunting me. And you are not safe." Ryan clenched his fists. "Then we'll find somewhere safe. Together." The determination in his voice seemed to reach her. For the first time since they met, a faint smile crossed her lips. "Humans, so stubborn." "Yeah, we are," Ryan said with a small grin. "Get used to it." The ship's lights flickered, and an alert blared through the cabin. Ryan's heart sank as a screen displayed a warning in a language he couldn't read. Aylin's eyes widened. "They've locked onto us. A patrol ship, closing fast." Ryan's stomach dropped. "How do we stop them?" Aylin took a deep breath, steadying herself. "The ship has defenses, but they are limited. You must activate them." She pointed to another console. Ryan moved quickly, pressing the glowing symbols as she directed. The ship jolted as its exterior lit up with a shield of energy. A burst of light shot from the rear, striking the pursuing craft. Through the window, Ryan saw the enemy ship wobble, smoke trailing from its side. But it wasn't enough to stop it. The patrol ship fired back, its blasts rocking their craft. Sparks flew from the walls as alarms blared. Ryan turned to Aylin. "We can't take much more of this. What's the plan?" Her voice was calm but resolute. "I can overload the core. Create a burst that will disable them." "Will it destroy us too?" Ryan asked, fear creeping into his voice. Aylin hesitated. "If done precisely, no." "Then let's do it," Ryan said, moving to help her. Working together, their hands flew over the controls. The ship hummed with increasing energy as the core charged. The light inside grew blinding, and just as the enemy ship closed in, Aylin pressed the final command. A burst of energy erupted from their ship, enveloping the enemy in a dazzling explosion. The patrol ship spiraled out of control, vanishing into the void. Silence filled the cabin as the light faded. The ship steadied, and Ryan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looked at Aylin, who had slumped back into her chair, her energy nearly spent. "You did it," he said softly. Aylin managed a faint smile. "We did it." As the ship drifted into the safety of open space, Ryan knelt beside her. "Where to now?" Aylin's eyes closed briefly before opening again, her voice barely a whisper. "To find freedom." Ryan took her hand gently. "Then that's where we'll go. Together." The stars stretched endlessly before them, a new beginning waiting to be written. The ship floated in the calm expanse of space, far from the chaos they had left behind. The silence was almost unnerving to Ryan, who stood by the window, staring out at the vast sea of stars. Aylin rested in the pilot's chair, her breathing shallow but steady. Her silver skin had regained a faint glow, a sign that her strength was slowly returning. Ryan turned to her, breaking the silence. "How far are we from your home? Or wherever you plan to go?" Aylin hesitated before replying, her voice soft. "Far, too far, for you to follow." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean? We're in this together, remember?" She met his gaze, her violet eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "Ryan, your world is behind you. Mine is ahead. Our paths cannot stay crossed." He took a step closer, his chest tightening. "Why not? We've made it this far. I'm not about to let you go now." Aylin's expression softened, but she shook her head. "My people, they will not accept you. And the hunters will never stop if you are with me. You are safer on Earth." Ryan clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Safer? After everything we've been through, you think I care about safe? I care about you, Aylin." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise breaking through her calm demeanor. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. "Finally," she said, "you are different. Brave, kind, but my world is not like yours." Ryan let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. "Then we'll find another world. Somewhere new, where no one can find us." Aylin smiled faintly, her exhaustion clear. "You dream, like a human." "That's because I am one," he replied, trying to lighten the mood. "And humans don't give up." Before Aylin could respond, the ship's console emitted a soft beep. She straightened, her expression turning serious. "We are close to a jump point. A place where I can leave this system safely." Ryan's heart sank. He knew what this meant. "And where does that leave me?" She stood slowly, leaning on the console for support. "There is a small station nearby. I can drop you there. From there, Earth is reachable." Ryan crossed his arms, his voice firm. "And if I don't want to go back?" "You must," she said, her tone gentle but unyielding. "Your people need you. And I will never forget you." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. Ryan wanted to argue, to find another way. But deep down, he knew she was right. Earth was his home, and her journey was hers to make. The ship's engines rumbled softly as they approached the station. Ryan looked out the window one last time, the stars reflecting his conflicted emotions. "This isn't goodbye," he said quietly. "Not forever." Aylin's lips curved into a small, bittersweet smile. "Perhaps not forever." The station came into view, its lights blinking in the darkness of space. The time to part ways was drawing near, and Ryan felt a pang of loss he hadn't expected. But he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. Not yet. "You said." The small space station loomed ahead, its blinking lights a stark contrast to the endless black of space. Inside the ship, Ryan stood silently by the window, watching as they approached. His chest felt heavy, a mix of sadness and frustration building within him. Aylin was at the controls, her movements deliberate but slower than usual. Her strength was still returning, but her resolve was as strong as ever. "We'll dock in a few minutes," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Ryan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to face her, his expression a mixture of determination and reluctance. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" Aylin paused, her violet eyes meeting his. "It's the only way. You will be safe here. And I must keep going." He let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "Safe doesn't mean much when it feels like I'm leaving something important behind." Her gaze softened, and for a moment, the confident exterior she always carried seemed to falter. "You're not leaving anything behind. You've shown me that not all beings are selfish or cruel. You've shown me kindness, Ryan. That will stay with me. Ryan stepped closer, his voice firm. And what about you? What happens when you're out there, alone, with the hunters still after you? Aylin smiled faintly. I've survived this long. I'll manage. The ship docked with a soft thud, the connection to the station secure. A robotic voice announced their arrival, but neither of them moved. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Ryan finally broke the silence. You don't have to do this alone, Aylin. I know your world, your people. They're different. But I want to help. I'll find a way. She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but steady. You already have helped more than I could ever ask. But this is my fight, Ryan. You've given me hope. Now I need to fight for my freedom. His chest tightened, but he nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. If you ever need me, you know where to find me. Aylin's eyes shimmered, her emotions finally breaking through. I will remember, Ryan. And maybe, one day, our paths will cross again. She handed him a small device, its surface smooth and glowing faintly. A beacon, she explained. If you ever need me, or if I find a way to reach you, this will guide me. Ryan took it, his fingers brushing against hers. You better come back someday. Aylin smiled, the bittersweet expression lighting her face. I promise. The airlock hissed open, and Ryan stepped onto the station's platform. He turned back to see Aylin standing in the doorway of her ship, the light from inside casting her in a soft glow. Goodbye, Ryan, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Not goodbye, he replied. See you later. The door closed, and her ship lifted off, disappearing into the stars. Ryan stood there for a long time, staring into the void, clutching the beacon tightly. It wasn't the end, just the beginning of a new chapter, for both of them. And somewhere in the vast universe, he knew their story wasn't over.